started, I think. No. Okay.
Yes.
Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Ashok ji, why don't you start with 7 realities this morning?
Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. The 7 realities: existence, love, sacrifice, renunciation, knowledge, control, and surrender. I give no importance to creed, dogma, caste, or the performance of religious ceremonies and rites, but to the understanding of the following. The only real existence is that of the one and only God, who is the self in every finite self. The only real love is the love for this infinity God, which arouses in an intense longing to see, know, and become one with its truth, God. The only real sacrifice is that in which, in pursuance of this love, all things body, mind, position, welfare, and even life itself are sacrificed. The only real renunciation is that which abandons, even in the midst of worldly duties, all selfish thoughts and desires. The only real knowledge is the knowledge that God is the inner dweller in good people and in so called bad, in saint and in so called sinner. This knowledge requires you to help all equally as circumstances demand, without expectation of reward, when compelled to take part in a dispute, to act without the slightest trace of enmity or hatred, to try to make others happy with brotherly or sisterly feeling for each one, and to harm no one in thought, word, or deed, not even those who harm you. The only real control is the discipline of the senses to abstain from indulgence in low desires, which alone ensures absolute purity of character. The only real surrender is that in which poise is undisturbed by any adverse circumstance, and the individual, amidst every kind of hardship, is resigned with perfect calm to the will of God. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai.
Jai Baba. So, yeah. So I hope all of you got a chance. The two of you got a chance. There's too many of us this morning, so it's just 3 of us. So I hope you got a chance to read Tilopa and Naropa. Did anyone?
I went through that video of what parks. So what came out was that it's from that 16 minutes 20 seconds. It came out that the 0 and 1, that was very beautifully explained about
Oh,
the
you mean the
duality,
nothing and the everything?
nothing and everything. So I don't know.
That's amazing, right? It's one of the best. It's one of the best explanations of nothing and everything, and the whole central theme of Baba's. I think that those 10 minutes are divine, literally.
Yes, it's divine, and he's
Right?
really done a beautiful, marvelous job of explaining it, and made it simple for us to align with that, with what Baba mentions in God Speaks and in Nothing and Everything. So it's really,
So
I mean,
yeah.
great.
So the challenge is, the first time I came across these words and the frequent recurrence of these words, it's so damn confusing. Pardon my language, right? To a point where you even switch off whenever those terms reappear. And that's what was happening the first few times I read God Speaks, even as part of MBA, right? So it was something that I would just ignore. Hey, that's too complicated. That's just confusing. And over a period, I got some of it, but this was just definitive, right? Now I can sit and explain this to anybody in 5 minutes, right? That's what I liked about that, those 10 minutes that he describes it so beautifully without having to do uppercase N, lowercase n, everything. Beautifully, he does it. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, it's experience and scholarship. He's very academic. So, Thank you, What Parts, for that. Right?
Yes, it's brilliant. Thank you,
Yeah.
Karthik, for sharing with us.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so I'm more interested in Tilopa and Naropa this morning. So, how many students took out the time to do Tilopa and Naropa? None whatsoever. So, I was just thinking about it, and I was expecting this.
I started reading that.
Uh-huh.
First 1 or 2 pages, I didn't see any sort of a connection properly. So I lost out of that. I couldn't make out anything clearly.
Okay.
I should have read it completely, I think.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, that's all I have done too. Okay. So I've been asked to talk this morning in Bangalore on the Jayanagar Center, and so I had a busy day, and I was trying to put that together. And there's a little miracle that happened. Are you coming to this morning, Mama?
Yes, 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 yes.
So you will hear about that when you come
Yes.
there. It was such a joy that I was 24 hours back. I really was nervous about this morning, and now I'm on cloud 9, and that's Baba,
No.
right? Because it's a very complicated responsibility, and you being you shied away, right? And you'll see how Baba came to the rescue. Anyway, that's for later in the morning.
Share the recording after you. I mean, the Bangalore. Please share the recording.
Yeah, I don't know if they are recording, but I'm happy to take you through those slides some other day, and also walk through what I'm going to talk today. Basically, it's a gem of a book, and it's a little known book in the Baba world. And I thought that it should get some airtime in Baba circles. And this is my small effort toward in that direction. I don't know how far it will go. It's Baba speed from here, right? It's not our speed.
Yeah. You say you just surrender it to Baba, and that say that I'm whatever happens is Baba's wish. Jai
Perfect.
Baba.
Perfect. Yeah, Jai Baba. So this is about. So I went through exactly what Mamaji went through, which is I read up to somewhere here, and then I said, "Hey, wait a second. What are we trying to get to here? Let me go finish my slides and come back." And then by 10 o'clock, my energy is very low. I got up again at 4 a.m., but then I didn't have time for this. I went back to slides. Anyway, long story short, I have not read this. And as I was running this morning, I was thinking how to fix this bad student problem that we have in our group. So I think let's in the future we will not give assignments that's addressed to all. What we'll instead do is pick a particular task or assignment and assign it to a particular person, and that person comes and tells the group about it. So if we take this example itself, we could have nominated one of us to read and make a 5-minute presentation on how that makes sense, and subsequently the others can actually go out and read. Such
Yes.
the model is better than what we are doing, because at least one person reads.
And
Right?
reads consciously to tell others also.
I'm telling you, the amount of research I had to do for nothing and everything this week. I'll tell you, it's very tough, right? Teaching
Yes, yes,
is the best way to learn,
yes, yes,
right? Teaching is the best way to learn, and as an academic, you know that, Mamaji.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Anyway,
The
so
whole
let's
week I was thinking about nothing and everything,
and
but
how I'm
how
going to get
to
roasted.
yes.
I am not getting roasted. Thank you, Baba. Okay, so let's get back. So we will still read Tilopa and Naropa, and at least see. I think with due respect to Ward and his efforts, there's not without a reason that he's put out those things in the packet, and it's not without reason. More importantly, that Ward Parks has mentioned these aspects from history and literature. right? So it's bounden on us that we spend some time and read all of this in this serious path of learning, because it's not a casual poetry that we're reading here. So I think let's try to do it later this week, and maybe who wants to volunteer? It's just 8 pages, right? So who wants to volunteer for next week? If nobody volunteers, I
I
nominate.
I will read that and try to put it across in my
Excellent.
own
Thank you
way.
very much. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So
Okay.
what we start with is Tilopa Neropa, but we will get a deeper reference and how the text is useful next week, right?
Yes.
Mama Ji will tell us. All right. So
Yes.
with that, let's reread from physical page number 27. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Listen to the delightful story of the mercy of God in the form of Tilopa, and how he brought up Naropa from the gate of hell and bestowed on him eternal bliss of truth. Naropa was a bright young man, earnest and gifted. One night, he was engaged in a liquidation ritual for someone. He didn't like the look of when an angel appeared and warned him. If you can't absolutely guarantee him a better birth next time, you yourself could drop back the rounds even to stone stage again. This gave our young dabbler in lives a terrible fright, as no doubt it would have any usurer or manipulator or other human trafficker if they had been so told by an angel or anyone who could shine sufficiently brightly. So he asked the angel what he'd better do. And the angel said, "Luckily, I just got here in time. So and so's limbs are not yet unstrung, nor his soul shortened of experience. Go find Tilopa, who is the Jesus of this time. He can save you." So it's a conversation between somebody and at the face of Naropa, who's obviously dropped his body, and there is this angel that tells Naropa to go find Tilopa, who, by according to the angel, is the Jesus of this time. So maybe when we read more about that and research, we can also find out if Tilopa has been referred somewhere as a perfect master. In fact, that's a research activity I want to indulge in. What are the perfect masters as named by Baba? Right? There are a few, but then obviously he's not named all of them, and he has named a few of them who are in the plains as well. But I think it will be a good exercise for posterity to actually, through the ages, record the significant the titles and the classifications in the planes that have been given to historical personalities, so that it serves as a research tool and also some context for somebody who's on the path. Right. So that's something anyone can take up if they are interested. So we continue. So Naropa tramped off, inquiring as he went, did anyone know the whereabouts of Tilopa, savior of men? None did. But he would come across a butcher skinning a beast who would ask him to lend a hand. And our honors student would be palely offended, and a voice would say, "Too bad, young fella, that was I, Tilopa, who asked you." Or come up with someone swinging plonk who would offer him some. But he was choosy who he drank with, and the voice would say, "That was I, Tilopa, who asked you." So I think I remember from the notes when we were reading yesterday at the side of my eyes. So let's go to 163. Swinging plonk is drinking wine. So, oops, that's too many pages. 163. So Tilopa, swinging plonk is drinking wine. I remember seeing this in the back of my side of my eye. So basically, the reference there is the butcher and the wine shop or the tavern keeper. Both are Tilopa in disguise, and Naropa is not able to recognize that. He's not, as he's looking for Tilopa himself. That's what I believe it is.
Karthik, there is also an explanation about Tilopa.
Yeah, that we read. We can read again if you want.
If you could,
We
please.
read yesterday, so we'll read again. Tilopa, a master in North India in the 10th century, Naropa became the guru of Marpa the translator, a Tibetan who founded the Kargyupta school in Tibet and whose disciple Jetsun Milarepa became its most famous master. This school is still active and functioning according to Marco Paulus in his Peaks and Lamas. For the teachings of this school, the only available books in English. Oops, sorry. Are you still able to see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. I had a outage. Okay. For the teachings of this school, I'm here. For the teachings of this school, the only available books in English are the 4 excellent volumes by W.Y. Evans Wentz and published by Oxford, Tibet's Great Yogi Milarepa, Tibetan Yoga and Secret Doctrines, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, rendered into English by Lama Kazi Dawa Samdup, and the Tibetan Book of the Great Liberation, translated by Sardar Bahadur S.W. Leiden La, CBE FRGS titles, and by the Lamas Karma Sundon Paul, Lobzang Mingyur Dorje, and Kazi Dawa Samdup. It is interesting to note the alteration of method of these masters. Tilopa treated Naropa extremely harshly. So that's coming out even in the disguises and the multiple attempts to tease him into recognizing it. Naropa was gentleness itself in his training of Marpa. Marpa is the school, right? Yeah, guru of Marpa. No, Marpa is a person. Marpa, the translator. Marpa's upbringing of Milarepa seemed pitiless, while Milarepa in turn gave his disciples every consideration. The reasons for these differences, and especially the reason for his own treatment of Milarepa, are beautifully and most touchingly explained by Marpa in Tibet's great yogi Milarepa. So, just for those of you, I'm sure many of you know that this book is pretty famous, right? It's the modern spirituality league of books. So it's right up there along with Autobiography of a Yogi and Secret and all of that. So it's very popular in popular spiritual culture, right? So just as context.
Okay.
Let's go to 33. I think you're. Okay. So let's continue. So that's the reference here. Too bad, young fella, that was I, Tilopa, who asked you. Or come up with someone swigging plonk who would offer him some. But he was choosy who he drank with. And the voice would say, that was I, Tilopa, who asked you. It was not long before our young friend developed chronic anxiety. Just a thought. Maybe we should put a different kind of note here to say that there is a note in the end. right? You know what I mean? I just want to mark out the places where we need to go to the notes if we are reading it again. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's a good cross-referencing. But Karthik, one thought comes to my mind and to the whole group is that Baba also was, attending his father's wine shop.
Yes.
Is there some? There could be some correlation, I think.
No, still there's no justification for your drinking. That's what you're looking for.
No. I'm not saying that. No, don't get me wrong.
I'm kidding, man.
Alcohol is harmful to the body, but I'm just saying that this story and also Baba, helping out his father in the wine shop.
It's all very symbolic, no doubt.
Symbolic and similarity.
No, I mean, anything that an avatar does, it's in fact more than symbolic. The wrong word. It's actually an expression of something far deeper, right? So we really don't know, and we will never know what was the intent and what was actually happening when he did that, right? So every act is deeply profound at multiple levels. What we see at the physical gross level is just nothing.
Absolutely. That's because of the world of difference between duality and reality. So
Correct.
The two different worlds. Jai Baba.
Correct. Jai Baba. Let's continue. It was not long before our young friend developed chronic anxiety. But eventually, he caught up with a real flesh and blood Tilopa, sitting by a waterhole, picking the bones of fishes and snapping his fingers, whereat the bones became reclothed with flesh and the fishes plumped back into the waterhole. So he's doing a little miracle there, right? So Tilopa sitting by a waterhole, picking the bones of fishes and snapping his fingers, whereat the bones became reclothed with flesh and the fishes plumped back. Talking of this imagery, the bones and the flesh, there's some very interesting repeat of this analogy coming with Iliad in the love song, John Kerry. So I've been going a little ahead on the videos of Stay with God, and just this morning I was listening to Ward where he was talking about how these bones, in fact, there's a lot of spear-based killing that comes in the imagery, and that's used as a way of destroying falsity and helping the soul realize the true nature. So in that you will see how this theme of bones and flesh comes back, right? The bones and flesh comes back as strokes of a brush and flesh being colors thrown on it. I mean, amazing poetic stuff. We'll get to it in a few, maybe in a few weeks, I think. Naropa, okay. Into the water hole, Naropa flung himself in the dust and grabbed his feet and begged him to be reasonable and allow him to go along with him. And Tilopa, who had all this time only been teasing him, allowed him. So that was his way of accepting Naropa. Now, Naropa's real troubles began. Life with Tilopa was one long and unfailing embarrassment, as exampled when a bride and her escort of male relatives passed. And Tilopa said, I want that girl, get her. Naropa was left half dead on the road. Tilopa hadn't even waited. But all roads lead eventually to the master's grace, and Naropa's to a campfire one evening, and Tilopa whacking him over the head with a chappal, shoe, and knocking him up to the seventh plane of God. So this is another incident that's being talked about here, where he puts him in a spot. He puts him in a complicated, it gives him a complicated or difficult request. He says he wants a girl who's just a bride who's being escorted on the road. And it says Naropa was obviously shocked on what to do, but it's not really clear what happened after that. But then there's also an incident where we see something that we saw with Upasani Maharaj and Baba, where here a shoe is being whacked by Tilopa on Naropa to send him to the seventh plane of God. So direct God realization. Any thoughts? Any reactions?
This, if you put this as a background and see the different ways Baba treated people and unexplainable or ununderstandable ways of Baba comes to fore. So he used to be so very graceful sometimes and so very, say, harsh sometimes.
Harsh. Yeah.
Yes. All that. Maybe this is the way they train us.
No, but I think a lot of the masters do that, and in fact, the two types are also classified in Sufi culture, right? The Jalali and the Jamali.
Yes.
So even within
and even the Jamali can become Jalali at times.
Jalali, exactly. So, but I think if you look at Baba's life, I think he was probably a lot more Jalali in the initial years. I don't know. I have not read Lord Meher, but what you hear on accounts sporadically, you see those harsh treatment and really things like he used to even hit and slap people in Manzile meme days. So I don't think that happened as he aged. So I think that phase. Yeah, Sanjay.
Yeah, there was also a difference between he treated the Mandali and the public in large.
Yes,
So
I
Mandali
was
treated
thinking of that.
very harshly, but the people are at large, the Janta or the common followers would be treated very kindly. Yeah,
correct. That's a good point. Yeah, because all that we hear of these incidents of episodic Jalaliness is only with Mandali. You're right.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go from there to Jalaluddin. And I think there's a note, so we'll quickly go to that note. Yeah. Next stanza is Jalaluddin. Okay, Jalaluddin Rumi. Jalaluddin Rumi, a perfect master born in Persia and afterwards settled in Asia Minor. So this is in the 13th century. His works, the Matnavi of Jalaluddin Rumi, published by Luzak and Co., Divani Shamshi Tabriz, translated by R.A. Nicholson, Cambridge Publishers, The Rubaiyat of Jalaluddin Rumi, translated by A.J. Arbery, Emery Walker Limited, were all written after his perfection, in quotes. There is a handy size selection by Nicholson in Rumi, Poet and Mystic, Allen and Unwin in their ethical and religious classics of the East and the West. The unflinching loyalty and implicit obedience to a master, even in the face of physical ill treatment, which is required of an aspirant on the path to self-knowledge, is difficult for the Western mind, groping as it is towards freedom and caught in the ideals of freedoms which are only its shadow, to appreciate. So it's difficult to appreciate. It's a complicated sentence, but all he's saying is Western mind finds it very difficult to appreciate. Yet our authorities have no hesitancy in imposing unflinching loyalty and implicit obedience on us in the case of national emergency. Here, we know about that. And after an initial period of rebellion, we have no difficulty in accepting the necessity for them. Whereas these requirements are imposed on us, whether by an authority we have freely elected to govern us and therefore actually representative of our own aggressiveness, or which we have been coerced into recognizing and therefore not representative of our particular expression of greed. It is still an imposition by our lowest instincts. The loyalty and obedience required by a master are freely accepted by the aspirant as a condition of his training and may be abandoned at any point where the aspirant wishes to finish his training. It is a requirement only so long as the aspirant places himself under the guidance and protection of that master. Furthermore, although there is pretense by our authorities of welcoming criticism and of encouraging discussion, the forms and channels of this criticism and discussion are so restricted as to render them ineffective. On the other hand, the requirement by a master of literal acceptance of whatever he says is not with the object of making the aspirant his shadow and robbing him of initiative. It is the requirement of a doctor of his patient whose health and well being is the only reason for association, and it is the earnest wish of the master that the aspirant use his initiative to the full to try to grasp the meaning and intention of the master. The following story told to me, I guess. The following story told to me by a disciple of Meher Baba illustrates the compassion of the master and his eagerness for his disciples' advancement. Once I was sitting with Baba and he said, I have all along been saying that I am one with everyone and everything. Have you grasped the meaning of it yet? I answered that I hadn't. He said, have you bestirred yourself, pricked your mind to grasp it? I replied, I had, but to no effect. So I have just accepted it as I accept other things as your say and therefore true, and have left it at that. Baba replied, it is no good just accepting what I say. You must try to understand it. Use your whole mind and try to understand, and you will. It should be also remembered, see 1911, note above, that a real master is one whose very existence among us is for the sole object of our well-being. Subscription of implicit obedience and unhesitatingly carrying out his orders can lead only out from self-entanglement into self-knowledge. Obviously, one is a fool of the most irresponsible order who offers such obedience to one who is not a perfect master. To the question, how can one determine that someone is a perfect master, may be answered, deserts are according to merits. The dishonest and the self-seeking will always pick the false teacher or the outright charlatan. The one who wants truth more than anything else, including himself, will be led by his own unexpressed truth to the man of truth. The same principle applies in life. One arrives at where one sets out for. The missile arrives at the target at which it was pointed. So let's just quickly see what 1911 is. 1911, perfect master. Okay, just description of perfect, definition of perfect master. But this whole thing about democracy and authority, did we see it somewhere else? I'm confused. I've been processing so many videos, so many texts, it's just confusing. But did we see something on this theme in the first few stanzas of Francis? Because it's somehow very, very familiar, where he talks about how true discipleship is different from submitting to an authority. Does anybody remember? Or I'm imagining. I'm sleep deprived. Ignore me.
No, I think this acceptance of Jalaliness of the master is to be done willingly with the faith that it is going to transform you or it is of benefit for you in the path. So that acceptance, that surrender is from your end. So once it happens, then you will get the benefit out of that. That is
Correct.
what is given out in this paragraph. So there is the involvement of the disciple in accepting things. So he doesn't actually suffer there because he totally surrenders or accepts it. There may be physical pain, there may be some difficulties in going through that, but because of his will to accept it as a gain for his say development in the path, makes him peaceful on that issue, I think.
Correct. But I think just to add to what you said, I think it's not restricted to surrendering to the Jalali nature. It's surrenderance in general that Francis is talking about here, and further Baba as well. And the further difference or nuance that Baba brings out in that little story is the fact that it's not just surrenderance, but you have to also apply your mind to try to understand it. Right? It's good,
Yes,
good
yes,
that
yes.
you're trying to surrender and accept whatever the master tells you. But how can you also try to apply your mind and try to understand why and why what is being said, right?
Yes,
So I
yes,
think
yes.
that's the two things that we're getting from here. Okay, let's go back. Where is the star? Hey, where's the star?
You didn't put a star for this, I think.
I just did. Oh, there it is.
Okay, okay.
I didn't put a star for this. You're right. Star. Okay, let's start the Jalaluddin stanza. Another story dear to devotees is the story of Jalaluddin, glorious light of God. Is that the meaning? I don't know. So he became. Another story dear to devotees is the story of Jalaluddin, glorious light of God. So he became. But first, wrote books of theology. One day, he was hard at his next opus, which no doubt would show him. When in walked a Rhodesman, debonair and dusty, who laughed at all this bookmaking, this darkening of counsel, with words without wisdom, this heaping up of straw for the ass of intellect to feed on, instead of being busy with God, with O God, O God. With words without wisdom, this heaping up of straw for the ass of intellect to feed on, instead of being busy with O God, O God. Very telling lines. I think Baba is basically targeting Meherabad Awakens group. And all this bookmaking, this darkening of counsel, with words without wisdom, this heaping up of straw for the ass of intellect to feed on, instead of being busy with, oh God, oh God. So he's telling us, you intellectual fools, you are the asses that are just feeding on straw. Think of God more, call his name out, love him more.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway. So this, let's continue. He must have been ready for turning, getting tired of trying to get gold out of lead, make fire with green wood, grow grapes in waterless sand, irrigate an orchard, with a bit of piddle trying to fashion. Let me read this again. He must have been ready for turning, getting tired of trying to get gold out of lead, make fire with green wood, grow grapes in waterless sand, irrigate an orchard with a bit of piddle, trying to fashion likeness of God in himself and others without possessing a breath of silver to inform form, because he took the hint and started tagging around with his new friend, whose name was Shams A. Tabriz. Okay, so he's making an example of multiple uh, uh, things which are impossible. Getting gold out of lead, making fire with green wood, grow grapes in the waterless sand, and even irrigating an orchard with a bit of pea. Trying to fashion the likeness of God in himself and others without possessing a breath of silver to inform form, because he took the hint and started tagging around with his new friend whose name was Shams-e Tabriz. So maybe I think he's referring to Rumi's journey of trying to do these multiple things and trying to do these impossibilities till he comes in touch with Shams. Shams is the name, and he happens to be from Tabriz. Now, Tabriz is the name of the city where they lived, and Shams in Persian is the name of the sun, which means this man was the glory of that city and as bright as anyone this side of Muhammad. As Jalaluddin later wrote, when the sun of Tabriz showed his face, the sun of heaven hid his face for shame. Sea, Matnavi, a very ocean and a mirror to be avoided if you would not suffer drowning, or sight of thy soul's foulness. So he's talking about the brightness and the greatness of Tabriz, and he says, go read Matnavi, and it's to be avoided if you're scared of drowning and recognizing how bad or how weak your soul is in comparison to the message in the book. And Matnavi, if you remember, came across even as the title in the notes that we just happened to read. So tender was Sham's heart that after he was flayed alive and maggots infested his flesh, when he walked and any dropped off, he would pick them up and place them back on his person, saying, "This was created for your food, eat of it." This had come about because the king's son had died, and the king hated religion and ordered the priests to restore the boy under pain of religion's abolishment. But they, being only priests, were more skilled in words than in magic. So there's again a reference to something that has happened in Tabriz with the king. The king's son had died, and they were trying to probably revive him. And the priests who were asked to do it obviously were good with words, but not with magic. They were not in the plains to be able to do any miracle. So they begged Shams to be their Shams, I think. So they begged Shams to be their Moses and Jesus and breathe on the boy with his life-giving breath and restore order where ruin had already begun to unshapen his shapeliness. As the fool whom Jesus suffered to accompany, as the fool whom Jesus suffered to accompany him, asked Jesus bring to life some bones they came across in the desert, and Jesus exclaimed, "Lord, is it possible that a man can be so lost that he prefers dead bones made living, that his own living soul restored to wholeness?" So he's giving a biblical reference to say how Jesus also struck down on a request for somebody reviving dead bones. I mean, probably there was a request to revive some animal or a person in the desert, and Jesus turns it down, saying, "Is it?" He actually talks to God and says, "Is it possible that a man can be so lost that he prefers dead bones being made alive rather than his living soul, his own living soul, being restored to wholeness, which is our true state. Right? Anything else? Any points? No. Now, let's continue. Now, although Shams had the example of how Jesus was rewarded, had pity that the people should not be deprived entirely of religion. So he went to the palace and stood before the dead boy and cried, "In the name of God, arise." But the boy's spirit did not cast off death's veil, because in the name of is not the name as any lover knows. That talking about love does not move a woman to take off her clothes even on a hot night. Only "I love you" is effective. So he explains how Shams tries to revive the boy, and he says, "In the name of God, arise." And this boy's spirit, the boy does not revive. And he gives an example that just name is not enough to even get a woman to seduce a woman, because you have to convey the love. You have to not just call out the name, but convey the love to God by saying, "I love you." And I think that's what is being brought out here. Then Shams, of his own divine authority, commanded, "I bid you rise." And the boy's spirit hastened to obey and returned and sat up. Then the priests, those incompetents who but for Shamsuddin would have perished miserably, cried, "Blasphemy! He has equaled himself with God. Flay him, flay him." So the king handed Shams over to the anger of their shamelessness. Such was the man whom Jalaluddin had the supreme fortune to meet and become his disciple. The poetic words are so beautiful here. So the king handed Shams over to the anger of their shamelessness. So the priests are angry. They are also shameless. Firstly, they could not do what the king bid them do, which was to revive. And when someone actually did it, they actually accuse him of blasphemy and get him punished, which is, I think, even with death. I do not know. We'll find out, right? So that's what's being conveyed here. Any comments?
This happens to many of that masters, I think. So he has equaled himself to God. Play him, play him. So we want to keep God away and then think of him only from a distance. But when God comes to you and then displays that he is the God, then we want to drive him out. That's the irony.
Isn't the reference in discourses to Anal Haq also to Shamsuddin? The guy who says Anal Haq and is killed for it? I think so. We'll see. Because there is a reference to Anal Haq, which is "I am God," and he's killed for blasphemy. Let's see. The search sometimes is crazy in Mac and Adobe Mama for you as well. It sometimes messes up big time. Anyway, that's something we can research later, and I can post on the group if what I'm thinking is right. But I think there's something there. There is someone who in the Persian world is killed for a blasphemous statement, and that statement is Analhat, which is the equivalent of our Vedantic Tattvamasi, but it goes like I am. I am God. I think it says I am God in Persian. Yeah. Let's continue. But ignorance is not replaced by knowledge until the mind's stream, fouled with the bodies and wreck of countless lives, is drained off. The channel dredged, and the sweet waters of eternal existence let in. So, Shamsuddin, all loving and regardful of his pupil's future glory, disgraced him before the Muslim community by making him carry openly through the streets a demijohn of wine and threw his precious manuscripts in the well. Again, I think there is a reference to this story that we came across somewhere where Shamsuddin humiliated or put Jalaluddin through a test by asking him to carry openly in the streets of Tabriz a pot of wine. Demijohn, I think, is a reference to a particular, what do you call, vessel to carry wines, maybe. You'll find out.
Jay Baba, I think it is there in discourses.
Is there in discourses, right? See, our cross-reference man is always ready with his facts. So, demijohn is something like this: wine, a bulbous, narrow-necked bottle holding from 3 to 10 gallons of liquid, typically enclosed in a wicker cover. So that's Arabia for you. So yeah, it's a demijohn of wine, but in this case. Okay. But the trials of love are not longer than needful for purgation. Okay, but before that, the first two lines talk about Manonash, right? So, but ignorance is not replaced by knowledge until the mind's stream, fouled with the bodies and wreck of countless lives, is drained off, the channel dredged, and the sweet waters of eternal existence let in. So this is a good poetic expression of Manonash, right?
Yes.
But ignorance is not replaced by knowledge until the mind's stream. So the mind is treated like a stream, which is fouled with the bodies and wreck of countless lives, is drained off. It is the receptacle for sanskaras and hence has bodies and wreck of countless lives. It needs to be drained off. The channel needs to be dredged, and the sweet waters of eternal existence, like we read it this morning in Seven Realities, should be let into that stream. So it's a beautiful imagery for Manonash, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So that's that. Let's continue. But the trials of love are not longer than needful for purgation. Of unlove, as the wheat threshing is not longer than the separation of the chaff from the grain. And Jalaluddin's came to an end one night after a game of chess. Lost again, he cried. But Shams, smiling like destiny wrapped in love, said, "No, this time you're won," and struck him a blow and dispelled his ignorance forever. Then was the father again well pleased. Again, very beautiful imagery in the first 2-3 lines. But the trials of love are not longer than needful. So he's saying that the trials and tribulations of a love relationship are only till the culmination or the consummation. So, and he uses the word purgation here, which is cleansing or removal of bad stuff. I know. Let's look it up. What is purgation?
Purgation is something like taking out all the things, bad things out.
Yeah, cleaning, evacuation of the bowels brought about by taking laxatives. That's your medical explanation, right? So, yeah, but so he's saying that the trials of love are not longer than needful, and of unlove, for purgation of unlove. Okay, so but the trials of love are not longer than needful for purgation of unlove. So the moment you take out hatred, the tests and trials of love are over. And he gives an analogy, as the wheat threshing is not longer than the separation of the chaff from the grain. So you need not keep hitting the wheat after the chaff separates from the grain. You know, the threshing of the grain, right? You beat it, or you beat the grass, the wheat grass, to separate the wheat, and it falls away, and then it's done. So you do that. You put the strands of wheat through that tribulation only till it separates. So in the same way, I mean, he then goes on to say, Jalaluddin lost again to Shams on a game of chess, and Shams says that you have won, and actually strikes a blow to finish his ignorance forever. So maybe we should read a little about his biography to understand a little more, right?
This poem also gives an indication that all that the Mandli people went through, and also what Baba puts us into so much of say apparent trouble is for purgation. And he also gives a hope. Unlove. Yes. And he that one sentence gives an idea that it is not an everlasting trouble. It will stop once your unlove is removed.
Yes.
There is hope.
It's a line of hope. There's a line of hope there. Yeah. A line of hope that it's not forever that the trials are on. Well picked, well pointed out. So let us continue. Let us return to the tale. But when did we ever leave the tale? That which furthers our argument is not really a digression, he says. The point we have been explaining is that the true master has two sides, the gentle and the strong, the smooth and the rough, just as the world of people has two sides to it. The woman whose mystery is in her gentleness, and the man whose strength is in his pride. These two, the shadows of the loveliness and glory of God. So that he's basically drawing to a close this comparison between Jalali, Jamali, and the nature of masters and their work by this para, right? So he's giving that comparison, and then compares it to woman who's supposed to be very gentle, well, most cases, and then strength of man and pride. I mean, the strength of man is in his pride, right? Then we continue. The Manzil-e-Mean lasted as long as the money lasted. Then we came over to Arangaon, Baba said. Arangaon, village on the Deccan Plateau, 5 miles south of Ahmednagar, edge of monsoon belt, dry, only 8 to 10 inches sometimes. They did not settle here, but were soon off on the roads again for a whole year from place to place as far as Iran, with Baba fasting not for his own sake, since he is perfect, but as part of his work for men. So here the reference is Manzil-e-Mean being wrapped up. We will, you will probably go through that in Lord Meher as well. Then they came over to Arangaon, which is described a little bit here. He says edge of monsoon belt, dry, and then he says even specifically 8 to 10 inches of rain sometimes. That too sometimes. They did not settle here, but were soon off on the roads. Again, there's a reference to how much of travel that Baba did. So he said off on the roads again, and then from place to place as far as Iran. So that gives you an indication of the global nature of this travel. And then there's a reference to Baba fasting, not for his own sake, since he's perfect, but as part of his work for men. Continue. For reasons of work I was then doing, I took food and drink at fixed intervals of 36 hours or more. At times, for a week or two at a stretch, I remained on a few sips of tea, milk, or soup each day, suffering weakness as anyone else who fasts. Always, they would be going to settle, but as soon as the disciples began arrangements, he would order the wandering resumed.
Yes.
So there's a little bit of a description of the nature of those fasts, and then the nature of the impermanence and the temporary settlements that Baba used to create and end. So they were they almost, when they were thinking it's going to settle, he would say, resume the wandering. Right? Finally, they came back to Arangaon and settled on a paddock which a disciple had brought outside the village, and on which was a stone water tank, military purposes, between 1914 and 18. Stayed 4 days, came back again for 11 days, a third stay of 2 days only, and a fourth of 3 months. Each time, camp clearing, water carting, the tank was empty, building, first period of Gamela Yoga, hard yakka for the disciples. So this is a very nice poetic description of what all happened in the first few visits of Baba to Meherabad. It kind of comes to life. You see what happened there: camp clearing, water carting, and I think the word Gamela refers to Sanjay ji can help me here. It's the Marathi term for I think
basin on which
basin,
the cement
which,
and
cement
are
is
carried
carried.
on the
Yeah,
head.
there it is. There it is. Yeah. So Gamela. So Gamela Yoga is more about this constructive phase. And I think there's some other word that Baba's used, right? Gamela period or Gamela. I mean, that phase is called Gamela or something. Anyway, let's continue. A windy, desolate slope, everywhere overgrown with thorn bushes and infested with snakes and scorpions. They cleaned out the tank for a meeting room and added a story for a dormitory. Laid out a garden, built a stone cavity, earth-filled wall around the lot. Piped water from a well half a mile away. Built a small room of stones and lime for Baba where he sat when he did the other sort of work he does while he is here. So the universal work here is referred to as the other sort of work he does while he is here. Just those of you who know Meherabad history, is the Meher retreat the water tank?
Yes.
Because it is okay. So the top floor is the actual water reservoir, and on top of that they built one more. Is it?
Yes. The ground floor.
Okay. Oh, the ground floor was the tank.
Reservoir, which is typically reservoirs because of their basically weight of water is like bottoms are thick wall, and as you grow up the walls becomes thinner because of the load of the water. That's how, if you see, the bottom portion is tapered. And then
okay.
the first floor has been constructed just as a big hall.
Okay. So where we see the library,
Basically,
the
if
kitchen,
in construction,
and-
you have
Mhm.
that round plate where they put the cement and mixture to carry it. In UPs, they call it something else. That is Ghamela.
yeah. This
And
is the one.
Ghamela is synonymous of basically labor phase, and it was used during the new life.
Correct.
That word. Yeah, this is the
Correct.
Ghamela, the orange thing.
Correct.
Earlier they used to make it out of steel, the GI sheet, and
Correct.
the steel. They're making out of plastic also.
Yeah.
This is Ghamela. Yeah.
Great. So I hope everybody remembers that building, right? The MPR, which is just next to the Samadhi. That's what I think is being referred to here. This para.
Yes.
Continuing.
Yes. That's the Meher retreat, right?
Correct. Meher retreat, not MPR. Correct. It's called just Meher retreat. Yeah. Thank you. So continuing, the same silence he returned to, as was before he spoke the word, which was his question, "Who am I?" and birthed a world of universes and a universe of three worlds, spun them upon the axis of his own name, and groped his way through all the forms to man, to perfect manhood. The same silence, but now of knowledge bliss, pregnant equipoise of action. Superlative words, superlative poetic expression. I'll repeat it. That same silence he returned to, as was before he spoke the word, which was his question, "Who am I?" and birthed a world of universes and a universe of three worlds, spun them up upon the axis of his own name, and groped his way through all the forms to man, to perfect manhood. The same silence, but now of knowledge bliss, pregnant equipoise of action. So he talks about Baba's
stanza.
silence.
Yes.
Amazing stanza. It's just brilliant. Just brilliant, right? So,
and he gives a new meaning to that silence also. The same silence he returned to, as was before he spoke the word, which was his question, "Who am I?"
Who am I? and he talks of universes and a universe of three words, the GSM.
Yes.
And then amazing. And then spun them up on the axis of his own name and groped his way through all the forms to man, which is evolution, and to perfect manhood through involution. And then the same silence, but now of knowledge bliss, pregnant equipoise of action. Yeah, amazing stanza. Now he made a setting for the jewel of selflessness, built a scaffolding for the house of service. He built a hospital and dispensary, a boys' school, and shelters for the mendicant and the migrant poor. In a model township of 300 souls, class was abolished and creed each one's affair, and they who were called untouchable freely mingled. Each served and received service. Baba bathed the boys, washed clothes, and cleaned latrines. The disciples had sparse food, and he less than they. Again, it all comes to life as you read this. You can actually imagine what is happening in Meherabad. So it's beautiful to go through this. He had a table.
Period.
Yeah, this is the Premashram days. So, and he's talking about the service orientation in those days. Those early days where hospital, dispensary, and untouchability was abolished within the group. No caste, no creed. And Baba did a lot of work, including cleaning latrines. So all of that is brought out here. He had a table 7 foot by 5, set up by the road, and 3 sides of it enclosed. In this, at night, he wrote his book and continued by day is other activities. Between certain hours, I freely saw visitors. Hundreds came to see me, believing in my spiritual status. But most of them only sought my blessings, hoping to obtain health or advancement or spiritual powers or a good marriage for their daughter. Sometimes the stream of visitors continued from morning till evening. So it's the table room that's being talked about, and his secret book. On one occasion, a man wanted to give me everything he had and begin a new life of renunciation and service. Everything turned out to be a wife and 7 children. On another occasion, a yogi, determined to find God at any cost, sought my instructions. I told him to wait for him under a tree. He waited 7 days. On the eighth, preferred his life to God. But there were real seekers, like one who kept seclusion and silence even when a cobra came into his cell. So there's a little bit of description of the people he met. And I think I remember the story about somebody asked to wait for 7 days and then he leaves on the seventh, saying, I give up. I don't want to continue here. And then also the other one, I don't know about the cobra example here.
I don't know to whom it is referred to, but these are all incidents which will be very clear with Lord Meher.
Yep. So quickly, I think I missed a note. Yeah, Islamic tradition, 29.6 and 29.8. So let's read that and then come back, okay? Islamic tradition. In showing Jesus as less remote and more human than Christian tradition shows him, Islamic tradition is more interesting than Christian. Let me read that again. In showing Jesus as less remote and more human than Christian tradition shows him, Islamic tradition is more interesting than Christian. The reference here is to Islamic reference to Isa. That's what they call him. So there he says, and I'm not aware of that he is referred to as more human and less remote. Let's go on. There is no reason why God should not have a sense of humor. In fact, if he hadn't, we couldn't. Something cannot come from nowhere. Every limited quality must come from an unlimited one. Meher Baba has said, my sense of humor is infinite. And where the Islamic tradition has an actual Quranic foundation or results from Muhammad's sayings, it will be truer than Christian, since the Quran was written by Jesus, called by another name, and the Gospels weren't written by Jesus under any name, but by men long afterwards. So it's about Quran and Gospels and the reference of how that could how Jesus is treated by the Quran, right? Jesus is deified, and I know we saw in the first few stanzas how the reference to the lamb and the lion is a dominant theme that Francis brings out about how Jesus is potentially misrepresented by the biblical history, and here he's talking about Islamic tradition doing a better job.
Last sentence is not clear for me. Since the Quran was written by Jesus, called by another name, that is Bible, is it?
And yes, but whereas the Gospels, the Gospels are basically written after the Bible, not by God, but by historians. Like, so he's saying obviously Quran has better value because it was actually written by written by Jesus in another name. So the historical significance of Quran is basically, I think, Muhammad heard it from God and wrote it down or said it. And then there were versions of it. And then they actually, I think, in the lifetime of Muhammad or at the end of it, They all put it together as one final version and destroyed all other copies. But basically, it's the word of God written down right then and there when it was heard. So it was a voice that dictated the Quran. Anybody can help by if they know more, they can jump in and describe that. But Gospels are just stories.
In the historical timeline, which came first, Christ or
Christ.
So Allah is more recent. Quran is more recent.
1400 years.
1400 years.
Yeah. 700 before that was Christ.
Christ.
So
And
700, 1400. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm again curious, who is in between Baba and Allah? Every 700 to 800 years, there has to be one, right?
No. So Baba says it alternates between 700 or 1400.
1400. Yes.
So it was Christ, followed by 1400 years Muhammad, and after 700 years Baba. So now it is 1400 years.
Next one is 1400 years.
Correct.
All right. Okay. Yeah, got it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Jai Baba Karthik, I was just looking at page 410 of discourses. So Anal Haq is there in discourses. I just want to reconfirm what I said.
No, Anal Haq hai, but is that the reference to Shams as well?
Well, I will get back on that, please.
Yeah, please. That would be very nice. So just check if Shams and blasphemy is there. Just search for the word blasphemy, because that's what is used in discourses to convey the death of Shams.
I just wanted to ask you, when we have the PDF file, can we do a search on that? I don't know whether that doesn't
yes,
work.
You can. If you're on Mac, you just do Command F.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Command
on Command F.
Yes.
F for find.
Find. Okay.
Yeah, F for find. And,
Command F. That's for. Thank you. I'm learning something.
That is assuming both of you are using Adobe. I don't use Preview. I use Adobe. Mac natively comes with an application called Preview for PDF. If you're using that, I'm not using that. I use Adobe.
So we have to search for
Adobe.
Shams. Is it Shams, no?
Just search for blasphemy. There may not be too many. Maybe one or two. So we can see if that story is referred to. I wish Kama was here. You'd have saved us some bother. He, in fact, called me at 6:30 when I was on my run and said, "Hey, where's the call?" I said, "Hey, where are you?" And he said, "I'm in New York." I said, "Another hour." And then he said, "Okay, I'll join back," but he's not there. Okay, so that's about Islamic tradition. Can we quickly see what page? 29. Oh, so it's just covered here. So we didn't miss much. So we are here and we went and understood about that Islamic contrast. And the next one is, I think this is painful that I had. 29 and then 29.8. But then we finished the para, so we better read 29.8. But then what is the Islamic reference here? It's very general, right? Okay, so we'll read 29.8 and then go back to the stanzas. 29.8, the reward for miracle working amongst bigoted people is always violence. That is, when the miracle worker does jobs on the grand scale, not just giving farmers rain or women babies, and especially when he claims divine authority. In the case of a perfect master like Shams, naturally, he would know that the reward would be before he undertook the job. That is what is called compassion. It is, in the case of Jesus, his miracles were a necessary part of his work, which was crowned by his crucifixion with its attendant humiliation and was necessary for his work. As Muhammad's stoning was, and Meher Baba's bone breaking was. And his final humiliation will be necessary. I'll read that line again. I don't think I stopped at the right places. In the case of a perfect master like Shams, naturally he would know what the reward would be before he undertook the job. That is what is called compassion. In the case of Jesus, his miracles were a necessary part of his work, which was crowned by his crucifixion with its attendant humiliation and was necessary for his work. As Muhammad's stoning was, and Meher Baba's bone breaking was, and his final humiliation will be necessary. So he's basically bringing out the avatars and the specific humiliations or uh, 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 comparisons to the accident, which is very interesting. I did not know that Muhammad was stoned. Jesus crucifixion,
That
of course.
also I didn't know. Muhammad stoning also not known to me.
Correct. So that's a good, interesting parallel that he brings in the avataric periods where everybody has gone through it.
They have a practice of stoning at their divine place.
Kaaba, yeah.
So what is the story? Also, I don't know. Okay. Anyway,
I'll take that as a to-do and come back to find out more. I think it's. Yeah, go ahead, Sanjay.
Yeah, stoning the Satan, the Shaitan.
Okay.
Okay.
Jai Baba Karthik, since we have taken I just want to know that on page 155, the ways of the master is where there is a story about Abraham and Shams-e Tabriz. If you want, I'll read it or you can refer to it. It's two paragraphs.
Read it.
So two paragraphs from the discourses and for the benefit of all. So there is
Please read it.
There is a Quranic story of Abraham being called upon to sacrifice his beloved son Ishmael to the Lord. When Abraham, firm in his resolve and faith, was about to slaughter Ishmael, God intervened and accepted the sacrifice of a ram as ransom for his son. When Shams-e Tabriz ordered Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, his disciple, to fetch wine for him, he unflinchingly complied in order to please and win the grace of his master. At the time, the Maulana commanded a large following of Muslim divines because of his reputation as a great theologian in the Islamic world, and wine is religiously prohibited, haram to the Muslims. Hence, it was a crucial test for the Maulana to carry a jar of wine on his shoulders through the streets, but he did. This is I think we had a similar anecdote when we were reading a little earlier.
Absolutely. This is exactly the same anecdote that was referred. So Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi was asked to carry a demijohn, not a jar of wine, through the shoulders, through the streets, and that was a humiliation and a test for him. Yeah. Thanks for that connection.
Thanks to Baba, it struck me anyway. Jai Baba.
Yeah. Did you find the blasphemy thing?
No, I'm searching for blasphemy, but one second. It's not there in the
half the times.
I haven't heard this word being used anywhere in Baba literature.
It is there in the Bible.
I think I have seen it.
It's there in the Bible.
No, in the Baba literature.
Baba literature.
Thought Speaks and Discourses probably doesn't have this, but we must have. Okay.
Doesn't have references to blasphemy, you mean?
Yeah.
No. I'm pretty confident it's referred in discourses, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But anyway, Anal Haq we found here. Anal Haq is I am God.
Anal Haq is I am the reality, the affirmation of the God realized state. Pronounced Anal Haq sounds like hawk. Aham Brahmasmi. See also I am God. In inverted commas, realization. This is on page 410 of the glossary.
Yep, I was there. If you're seeing the screen, I was already there as you were looking it up.
Yes, you were there. You are there. Yes, there's no doubt. I just thought for the benefit of the group. Yes, Jai Baba.
Okay, we are almost out of time, and This we can stop here and oh no, we didn't finish this. Let's finish. We stopped at this para of the three incidents, stoning, and that's where we were. Let's continue. Humiliation precedes glory. Glory being the effect or triumph of the assertion of unlimited power under conditions of utter helplessness. The effect of the assertion of most unlimitedness in most limitation. Compare with the little flowers, where Francis is said to be greater than Mary or the disciple John because his suffering had been greater. The looseness and stupidity of the statement that suffering is good for the soul will be apparent. Suffering in itself never was and never will be good. It is simply the attendant condition of unfoldment and true assertion. Every step in evolution must have been, and every step in unfoldment in a man is, attended by suffering and crowned by a minor glory. So a lot of big things being said here. So he's talking about suffering and also beating up the biblical literature. And the Francis, Mary, and disciple John reference to that text, Little Flowers, is obviously to bring out this aspect that just because somebody suffers doesn't make it better for the soul. But he just says that there is a minor glory that is always following a suffering, right? So in many ways, Francis is very direct, and I mean Francis Brabazon is very direct and caustic and brutal when he's going after the old texts, the priests, the religious rituals, and all that. And that's something that's a theme. I think we'll see more of that coming up, right? So that's it, gentlemen. Anything else before we wrap up for the day?
Yeah, just one thought came to my mind.
Yeah.
So basically, the suffering which we go through is a cleansing process. Like so for removal of our sanskaras, we think it is painful, but it's a process of cleansing. Is what came out from what I could infer from what we read today.
The other point is as we read just now, the paragraph, suffering for the sake of suffering is of no good. Suffering with learning, that suffering and the thought on suffering, what is the outcome of this suffering? If it enlightens you, then it is of good. That's what he has stressed there.
Basically, at what level are you suffering? There is one physical suffering, there is also suffering because of separation, because of love, there is suffering. You are seeking your master, you are suffering. So it's at what level you are suffering, that's what makes it suffering.
Yeah.
How do you handle your suffering? Is something that you need to work upon.
Yeah.
If suffering leads you to surrenders and take it as the blessing of the master or the God Baba, that's something which gives you progression. And suffering just doesn't give you that. It's a suffering. It doesn't give you any benefit. Generally, Baba has said that suffering is good, but it's also incumbent upon the seeker how he handles it.
Sunil was saying something. Can you repeat?
Can you show the last para we read?
Yeah, the last para we read was on page 31. On one occasion, a man wanted to give me everything he had. Do you want me to reread the whole thing?
No. Just now there was something else about.
No. From the notes that we read.
Oh, from the notes? Okay, I'll just show you the notes. Yeah, this is where we were. Suffering in itself.
Yeah. So
This
there
is
is,
this is
yeah, within the brackets in the center of the para, there is, and his final humiliation will be.
yeah.
Can you see that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is that referring to?
What is that referring to? I also
Yes,
picked that
yes.
but ignored it. So I think that when this book was written, Baba kept talking about his pending or upcoming humiliation. Or it could be the second accident. Right? I would break my silence before my humiliation. So he says bone breaking, and I think that's the reference to the first accident. And subsequent humiliation is what he has talked about, because Baba was still in body when this was written.
Right. So question is, the final humiliation is already done or not yet?
That is the point. Yes.
Maybe
I
nobody
think
knows.
this
Okay,
message
sorry.
was his language. Actually. And Baba has said in many of his messages, like destruction of evil to the world. Some of the messages Baba has put in his language. Very difficult. Whether Baba
Sunil,
suffered humiliation or not,
yeah, go ahead.
not clear.
I think Sunil, just go on mute and Sanjay, repeat yourself, because we're getting a lot of new noise from Sunil's mic. You switch on only when you're talking, Sunil. Sanjay, can you just repeat what you said?
Yeah, what I said that this humiliation part, what Baba has said, is very difficult to comprehend, and probably it is given in his language. Some of the messages which Baba has given, he said they are in my language, not in your language. Like destruction of
Correct.
three-fourths of the world, that's given in his language. Very difficult to comprehend. Whether Baba has passed through this phase of humiliation, very difficult to understand.
Yeah, there are multiple things like that, right? His manifestation, his silence, and humiliation are three things that we do not know when, what, whether it's happened, whether it's not. Right? So that's well pointed out, Sunil. I mean, Sanjay. Sunil, you want to say something?
Yeah. No, I think that's the answer. So we'll just move on. Yeah, understood.
Okay. Were you there when we read? Oops. Where did that go? Were you there when we read this, Sunil?
I joined just 30 minutes ago, so may not be.
So
just
okay, so this is for you and me. At all this bookmaking, this darkening of counsel, with words without wisdom, this heaping up of straw for the ass of intellect to feed on, instead of being busy with oh God, oh God. What he's saying is, all this bookmaking, reading, and all of this is heaping up of straw for the ass of intellect to feed on, instead of being busy with loving God.
Yes, got it, Baba.
Yes, yes, Karthik, but Baba also says you must try to understand. But all this
I know.
all this reading understanding is up to you, so he keeps you confused. Actually.
I know.
No, in lighter vein, it starts with Sunil and ends with Namita.
Yes, super. Super, Mama.
Jai Baba, Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, Jai Baba. All right, let's wrap up. I need to run. We'll catch up next week, and please catch up with the videos. And Mamaji, you have an assignment. Tilopa and Naropa. Look forward to hearing more on that and catching up with all of you next Saturday. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai.
Jai.
Jai Baba.
Avatar Meher Baba ki jai.
Jai Baba.